Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 4 of the ATDev Podcast. I'm joined today by Darren Cooke, the Interim Executive Director of UC Berkeley's Innovation and Entrepreneurship Office. Thanks for being here, Darren.
Well, thanks, Owen. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And so we met Darren through SkyDeck's program when ATDev went through that. And Darren, it'd be great if you could just introduce yourself to our listeners and talk a little bit about what your background.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Again, my pleasure to be here. So, Darren Cooke, I'm the interim Chief Innovation and Entrepreneurship Officer for UC Berkeley. Also, I am the Executive Director of the Life Sciences Entrepreneurship Center at UC Berkeley, which I started back in 2021. New sort of virtual center that ties together resources that we have on campus. And in addition to that, I teach at the Haas School of Business. I'm professional faculty there.
That's awesome. You wear a lot of hats.
I do, right? I have a closet full of hats. so and I love doing it. I mean, so the variety of what I get to do day to day is really fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so how did your professional journey lead you to all of those hats?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people don't realize that if you go back 30 years, I was an engineer. I was actually an engineer at
Oh,
UCSF working.
really?
Yeah, did you not know that? Did you
I
say
don't think I knew that.
you didn't know that either, right? I was at UCSF, the Department of Otolaryngology, working on cochlear implants and
Oh, wow.
surgical tools. Yeah, and so I had a degree in mechanical engineering, and that was my first job out of college. And at the time, I was thinking, I'm going to go on to some sort of graduate studies. But at the time, I was thinking, and part of the reason I was at UCSF was because I was thinking I wanted to be a doctor, right? That was my big plan. I thought, what a clever thing to be a mechanical engineer who becomes a doctor.
Yeah.
And and the folks there were the doctors and residents and people I was working with at UCSF were so accommodating, and they would get me into these situations, which I swear are probably not legal anymore, like scrubbing into surgery and volunteering in the ER and that kind of thing. And what I realized is that it wasn't really for me. so it just wasn't a fit. And so I cast about for other things to do. And next thing I know, I'm in grad school in mechanical engineering at UC Berkeley, Tony Keaveney's orthopedic biomechanics lab,
Yeah.
and also realizing, am I getting a PhD in mechanical engineering? I didn't really know what I was going to do with that. So as it happened, the wife of a medical resident I was working with at UCSF was an attorney at a big law firm, and I learned what she got to do. And she was a patent attorney, and she had a technical, actually engineering background. I thought, that's exactly right. So the more I looked into it, I thought, yes, you know what? I'm leaving Berkeley to go to law school. So I applied to law school and did in 1996. I was in Berkeley in mechanical and orthopedic biomechanics on a Friday afternoon. Monday morning, I started at Columbia Law School the very next morning, the
Wow.
next week. I did that. I graduated with a law degree and actually was a full-time practicing attorney for 20 years. I originally was a patent litigator at a big law firm. I moved in-house to run an IP department at a mid-sized public company that makes research tools, Biorad Laboratories. And then in 2015, I was supporting all these acquisitions at Biorad, including pretty exciting startups. I really was bit by the startup bug. I want to work with those folks. And so
Yeah.
I left Biorad to start my own law practice, like literally in my basement. And just one thing led to another, where I started working with a lot of startups, but also started getting really embedded in the Berkeley ecosystem at that time. And the first major thing that happened was I became an advisor at Berkeley SkyDeck, our startup accelerator, and then everything else just
Yeah.
snowballed.
Wow, that is so interesting. I did not know a lot of that about your history. That's fascinating.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think you really exemplify one of the things I love about entrepreneurship, and especially entrepreneurship at UC Berkeley, is just the interdisciplinary nature of really what it takes to get a company from 0 to 1. And
Hmm.
that's definitely something that I learned through SkyDeck as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that I think that what you've hit on is the main strength of UC Berkeley's innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem is that it's big, obviously, and so I run in my new role. I run a INE Council, Innovation and Entrepreneurship Council, where we bring together the leaders of all the organizations on campus that support innovation and entrepreneurship, and we have a monthly meeting. Most people are surprised to learn that on this council there's 55 different organizations. So yeah,
Wow.
so SkyDeck is one of them, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's the magic really is in the network and the magic. And this started when Rich Lyons, who's now our chancellor, but the previous chief innovation and entrepreneurship officer, assembled the council. So this was his innovation back in 2019 when he became the first innovation officer for the campus. He put together this council, and that really had a really a magical effect on the ecosystem. And now maybe you've heard, according to PitchBook, Berkeley is number one for venture-backed startups in the
Yeah,
world.
I saw
So
that.
yeah, so this is really something that's taken off.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and definitely something that, ATDev, when we were going through SkyDeck, and even before that, when we were part of Dr. O'Connell's, um, exactly what you do, entrepreneurship and innovation is something that I think really is successful. Yeah, I'm curious from your perspective, what are some of the things that make Berkeley so successful in producing those venture-backed startups?
Yeah. So like I said, it's the magic is in the network, right? The
Mhm.
networked ecosystem really is firing on all cylinders. But we start early. So we have, and Owen, you know this because you've actually visited my class. We have a series of classes on campus called Berkeley Changemaker, which started just in 2020, like during the pandemic, and it was an online course, but it's grown into 40 different classes across campus, 40 independently run classes in every department that all share a common theme. So they have critical thinking, collaboration, and communication as the three elements of the course.
Nice.
And so I teach Berkeley Changemaker, Human Health, as because you were a guest there
Yeah.
semester before last. And just imagine, so if I think we've now had 10,000 Berkeley students take at least one of these Changemaker courses. Like
Wow.
10,000.
Wow.
25% of Berkeley students have taken at least one, which these are not entrepreneurship courses, right? However, because if you ask someone like, how many undergrads do you think should be entrepreneurs, like literally start their own company? Not everyone, right? It's not for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
But how many would benefit from an experience of thinking like an entrepreneur? They all would, right? Right.
Right.
So that's what these courses are about, where they think critically, they collaborate on a team, and they communicate with the rest of the class. What did they learn? So yeah, I think that's also a major innovation that we've had on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether or not you become an entrepreneur yourself, chances are, if you have a job, you'll end up working for an entrepreneur at
Hmm.
some point. It's good to understand the mindset.
Yep, exactly.
So we talked a little bit about Berkeley SkyDeck, which was ATDev's first venture capital check. Yeah, I'd love if you could maybe just talk a little bit about your role there and also what is SkyDeck for people who don't know.
Yeah, yeah. And thanks for that question. So Berkeley SkyDeck, it's our startup accelerator in downtown Berkeley. We, as you mentioned, we do have a fund and we do write checks to invest in companies that are in the program. ATDev was an invested cohort company. We have 50 of those invested cohort companies every year. So most of them are actually not in the bio space. Right? So most of them are on hard tech and deep tech and AI and SaaS platforms and enterprise and different areas. But about 20% of them are life sciences. And by life sciences, not just med device, but also therapeutics and tools and diagnostics and some digital health. So SkyDeck has been around now for 14 years. It started, if you're curious to know about the history, as it really did start as
Yeah.
a drop in space for Berkeley entrepreneurs. this was as I wasn't around at the time, but I just imagine it. It was a place with beanbags and snacks, right? This is just a place for people to go. And then when we hired Caroline Winnett in 2015, she really transformed it into the cohort program that we have now. So we're now in the 19th 6-month cohort, where
Mm,
the cohorts are either over the winter or over the summer. They get programming, so 70 live workshops every 6 months that are optional. You can go to the ones that make sense for you. Over 700 expert advisors. And these are, we don't take everybody. We actually are very careful about who we take as expert advisors. Each invested company gets 3 expert advisors bolted into the company for the 6-month cohort. Investor introductions at the end during Investor Month, which are facilitated by the SkyDeck Fund, and then a huge demo day. So it's been amazingly successful. So I think the success rate for companies that are graduating from SkyDeck is over 60% in terms of raising a significant next round.
yeah, yeah, quite a bit higher than the average startup success rate.
Mm-hmm. So, and you asked about my involvement with SkyDeck. So I
Yeah,
joined as an advisor in 2017, early 2017. And in the beginning, so I was involved in working with companies and was a key advisor to one of the companies and working on selection. But back then, our bio companies, and by that therapeutics and med device, et cetera, were just mixed in. Like even during selection, we would have a tax preparation company followed by a cancer therapeutic, which was difficult. It was difficult to manage that process.
sure,
And so actually, and also our bio companies were asking for like who are the real bio expert advisors, and do we have some special workshops for them, and all this. And we thought, you know what? We should have all of this. We should have a separate selection committee. We should have separate advisors who are bio experts, and we should have special workshops. And so we set this up in the first cohort of 2018. Coincidentally, actually, with the launch of the fund, but that's just a coincidence.
mm, interesting. Yeah, that biochock is what ATDev went through,
Yep.
and something that we really benefited from, especially having all of those experts that
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned. Yeah, and yeah, I think a theme of our conversation is the interdisciplinary nature of what it takes to bring a company to market. And from where you sit, how do you see academia supporting entrepreneurship and vice versa? How does entrepreneurship support academia?
Yeah. Well, so I think a lot of people are confused by when they think, wait, Berkeley is an academic institution. Why are we bragging about venture-backed startups, right? And how does venture and entrepreneurship and VC all fit into our mission? I think I get this question a fair bit, and what people are surprised to learn is that it's actually in our mission, and it's actually in the mission for University of California, because the mission is fundamentally providing long-term societal benefits. But that's
Right,
the fundamental mission of University of California, not just Berkeley. And then there's 3 pillars behind that: teaching, research, and public service. And again, you're still probably not seeing where the startups come in, because teaching is obvious. And I gave an example with Berkeley Changemaker. Research, of course, is the foundation. We couldn't have anything if we didn't have fundamental research that resulted in discoveries that could be commercialized. And so that's obviously important. But then public service, if you dig into the mission statement on the University of California website, public service includes translation of scientific discoveries for the benefit of California and the nation.
mm,
Translation meaning like commercialization, right? Getting them out of the lab. And so we've really embraced that. And we've really embraced that as one of UC's core missions, and we're going for it.
I love that. I think people often don't think of starting a company as a public service, but ultimately it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could argue that for some companies more than others, but certainly in the life sciences, the we at ATDev are a B Corp, not a C Corp, so we're a benefit
Mm-hmm.
corporation. So we have an additional shareholder, and we talk about them as the three P's: patient, planet, and profit.
Mm-hmm.
And so we aim to serve all three of those as our bottom line. And I think that's something that a lot of healthcare companies do. But I really like that you connected the public service to entrepreneurship.
Yep.
Awesome. And yeah, just to close out, I'm sure you've gotten this question before, but for students or people that are interested in starting their own company, what advice do you share with aspiring entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So this is one that I think a lot about because I do, as I speak to a lot of students, a lot of grad students, a lot of postdocs and faculty who are interested in starting a venture. And I think most assume the question I always get is, where can I find investors? I'm like, wait, hold on a second. Take a step back and really truly confirm that what you're working on is something that there's a huge unmet need for. And people pretty consistently say, of course, there's a huge unmet need. You can just tell, or I had an internship or something, right? And I think you and ATDev and Todd did go through the I-Corps program, right?
We did, yeah.
Okay.
I was going to talk about that. Yeah,
So this is where you learn either I-Corps or lean startup or whatever you're going to call it. An intensive customer discovery course is absolutely required before you do anything. So you're
yes.
familiar with the process, but maybe folks who haven't heard about this before aren't. Yeah, this is a systematic, structured way of hypothesizing about things that are relevant to your business and then going out and testing those hypotheses. And by testing, I mean you go talk to people who are experts who can prove or disprove them. And it's I've seen I teach the I-Corps program and I teach an MBA version of the course at Haas, the business
And
school.
that's sponsored through the National Science Foundation.
It is, right? Yeah. So the National Science Foundation sponsors the I-Corps program. Thank you for adding that.
Mhm.
I've now coached and taught over 500. Actually, it was over 500 a couple of years ago. So it
Wow,
must be six or 700 at this point.
amazing.
Teams, most of them academic teams that have gone through the process, every time they learn something surprising. Like I've never had a team out of hundreds come back and say, yeah, everything we learned was just what we thought in the beginning. That's never happened. And a lot of teams come back and say, either for, you know what, we're now not going to do what we plan to do. Like we're going to do something else because we realized either A, what we plan to do is not a good idea, or B, we found something else better to do just because of the
Right.
process. It's amazing the way that works. And so you really got to start there. I actually just coincidentally, I coached an undergraduate team just last week who said they've got this new innovation. It's in the AI space and it was getting a bit of traction. And they said, we really think we can move into another space. Like they can expand. I said, what's your experience with that other space? And one of these undergrads said he had an internship once and he thinks that there's a need there. I'm like, that's one data point, right?
Okay.
Like I would suggest maybe you do some intensive customer discovery around this point and see if your experience is true of the broader population before you run off and really put a lot of effort into expanding into a different market. So anyway, that's the basic advice.
Yeah, that definitely rings true from my experience, and yeah, we really benefited a lot from our I-Corps program. I think about half of the participants in our cohort ultimately decided not to start a company
Mm-hmm.
after going through the program. They went into it 100% sure that they had the next best thing, and half of them decided by the end of it that exactly like what you said. Their efforts were better put elsewhere, which is fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, and the NSF doesn't see that as a failure, right? They
Right.
absolutely see that as a success, right? Because you've got smart people with great innovations, And if they're thinking they could commercialize something that actually there's no market for it, much better to learn that in. So the longer version of the NSF I-Corps program is 7 weeks. Much better to learn that in 7 weeks rather than 7 months or 7 years.
Yeah, or $7 million.
Exactly. Yep.
Wonderful, Darren. Thank you so much for your time today. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. And thank you to our listeners. And we will be back with more podcasts soon.
All right. Thank
All
you,
right.
Owen. My pleasure to be here.
All right. Take care, Darren. Thank you.